Don't forget to record it as well, Anthony.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I don't see anybody else in the waiting room, so I'm going to record and go ahead and we'll get started. So, all right. Dr. Green, you ready to begin?
Yes, I think we each have 3 proposals that we're responding to or countering, or let me go back to that email that
I
you
think
had
I had 2 that we owed you. And before we start, let's just say today is October 25th. This is our 4th session. Is that right? 4th bargaining session for the 21-22 contract.
So do you want to go first or would you like me to go first?
You could go ahead and go first. So I believe what I'm waiting for from you was an answer about the 9-hour day camera and the drug-free workplace.
Yes. And the one that you had listed before, you had mentioned at our last session, you were going to make a determination of whether to withdraw or not.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Do I have the capability to do that?
Will in a second. There you go.
It says you've disabled participant screen sharing. It's very quick. I could just read it.
I think you're the co-host of Dr. Green, so you have the option.
I tried, but it said, oh, wait, there we go.
Try it again.
Right,
Yeah, I think it's just a lag.
Hang on. Tell me when you can see.
Got it, and it's small, so.
Okay. So this one has to do with the 9-hour day. Tell me when it's large enough. Oops, sorry.
Too big.
Can you see?
A little bigger. Yeah, a little bigger wouldn't hurt. That's good.
All right. So you sent us a new proposal on 1011, and we are countering it, and it would now read, in the spring of each year, teachers will be informed if their school will have an additional hour the following year. Upon learning of that decision, the district will inform teachers of the open transfer process. Teachers who are not able to work at a school with additional time and who have not secured a position through the open transfer or internal transfer process will be placed at another school following the summer deadline for internal transfers.
Now, quick question. You're saying the open transfer or internal transfer process, are you using those as synonyms?
No. So the open transfer window is that 2-week window that happens in the springtime following the voluntary, involuntary placement time.
Right.
They would know by that time so that they could participate in that open transfer process. And then the internal transfer is after all that is done. And then, you know, it goes through the summer and there's a deadline in the summer, 2 weeks before pre-planning.
I got you. All right. All right.
Okay, so that's the first one. Hang on a minute. The second one is the teacher protection. And you had submitted language, we had countered, last time you had countered. And our response to that is we are rejecting your response to our counter and resubmitting paragraph J.
Okay. And can you clarify why you're rejecting that?
Because there are things that occur on cameras, even positive things that we might want to use for something. If we are investigating a situation and something comes to our attention, it cannot be ignored. We would not have the liberty to do that. And by you asking us to withhold any information that is seen from video evidence is not something we can do, regardless of how we come across that evidence.
Well, I don't, that is not what was said in this. We just said that unless it's part of an investigative file, then it cannot be used.
But again, what if it was positive? I mean, there's some positive things that might be seen on camera when we're looking at something else.
Well, I don't think people our teachers are concerned about positive things being caught on video and used as a kudo. They're more likely concerned about another DCF police investigation by some, minuscule piece of video evidence without audio that looks like one thing happened when that may have not happened at all.
And so two things I want to say. The first thing is you forgot the last part of the sentence that you had put in there, which that results in disciplinary action. So not everything that is seen on video ends up in disciplinary action. Oftentimes it might be listed in, as a piece of evidence in an evaluation, or it might result in a closure that wasn't disciplinary. But again, it's prohibiting the use of any recording, which we're not willing to give up that piece of it.
So Dr. Green, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but I will say that this does confirm our worst fears about the usage of video recording in our schools, that we have been told they were there for security purposes. And that is not the case based on the continuous rejection of this language, even after discussing with several departments. What this is saying is these cameras are there to evaluate you and discipline you. So like I said, I'm not going to beat the dead horse, but as president of the organization, I will be sharing that message with our teachers. Yes, those videos are there to bust you.
And I'm going to vehemently deny that, because that is not what they are there for. They are there for the safety and security of our staff and our students and the people that visit our schools. That is the purpose of the cameras. It's the purpose of why cameras are all across the world. But if something should occur on a camera that we come across in the course of any other thing, we're not going to say that it cannot be used. I think we've had a lot of discussion, and I think that you've even provided us some language that has come across from arbitrators that a camera is just a minute piece of information, and it certainly can't be used as the totality of something that happens. There has to be something else. So it is for protection and it is for safety, and I would deny that your statement about your worst fears have been confirmed. I don't believe that you can point to a time when it hasn't been used as part of investigation, not something in totality that was found out because someone was sitting around looking at cameras.
Like I said, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I tend to assume the best intentions, but I'm also no dummy. And at this point, with the district digging in on this, it's not about assuming the best intentions. It's about listening to the information that I'm gathering, and the information I'm gathering doesn't mesh. Otherwise, this language would have been accepted, but I'm willing to move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. The last piece we have has to do with the drug-free workplace.
Can you make that one larger, please?
Yeah, I am. That's what I'm working on.
Okay.
Hang on one second. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. So again, this has had several iterations. We are responding with the initial first paragraph that we had when we made our first counter. So we, the last sentence goes back to the first one that we had. If termination occurs, Brevard Federation of Teachers may utilize the terms in Article 4 of this agreement to grieve the termination. We did strike the language that you had submitted, but we have added a paragraph which reads, a teacher who reports a workplace accident or incident will declare whether or not he or she was injured while making the report. Teachers not claiming injury will not be sent for post-accident drug alcohol screening. Should the teacher self-determine an injury occurred after the initial report has been made, the drug alcohol post-accident screening will take place at that time. So I think this addresses the bee sting. We have a drug and alcohol incident report form that has to be filled out, and there are currently 3 questions on that form, and I can find it on my desktop if you want me to look at it. But the 3 questions are you seeking medical treatment today? Are you going to miss work? And I cannot remember what the third, I can find it if you want me to find it. But what we would do is add a question on there which says, are you indicating, or it says right there, are you claiming that you have been injured today? That would be the first question. The second one would be, are you seeking medical treatment today? The question that is currently there that asks if they're going to miss time from work, we would remove that from that form at that time, because no one possibly would be able to answer that question as a first rush or a first run over or fill out of that form. So the first question would clearly say, are you claiming an injury as the result of this incident? And by them selecting no, they would not be sent for a drug or alcohol screen. And then down the road, again, if they do determine that they've been injured based on that accident, it would be at that time that they would go be drug or alcohol screened.
So,
and then the third paragraph is as it was, we originally had submitted 2 paragraphs. We've just added that one in between, but the third one is what you've seen before.
I do appreciate that you did some listening and included that paragraph, which I believe is somewhat helpful. Our concern still is, though, that the state statute says that the testing should only occur if there's information that that the drugs or alcohol contributed to the accident at work. Kyle, I see your hand up. You want to unmute and help me out with that right there?
Yes, Anthony, that was actually going to be my first thing. Dr. Green, I'm wondering why the district chose to strike all the language that describes reasonable suspicion in Florida statute. If that's what the policy is based on, why wouldn't we want that as our language that we're gonna, move forward to work on?
Because it's in the opening paragraph, which says what our policy is. It states it in the opening paragraph.
No, I understand that, but I believe we asked this question the very first day and never got an answer on it. Is the board allowed to change that policy anytime they want if it's referred to in our contract?
Well, it goes through the board policy change process.
So in other words, we could bargain something into the contract that the board could change unilaterally.
No, it goes through the board policy change process with the hearings and the input and the
but in the end, it's
the
their
readings.
decision to change unilaterally. So I think that's our first concern is why wouldn't we just accept the state statute, as written for reasonable suspicion? And the second thing is I noticed how you guys take out the words of everything. The only thing that can happen now with a drug test is termination. I don't even think that just is with the state statute because it's supposed to be rehabilitative and stuff like that. But obviously the decision's already been made that no matter what, we're going to terminate an employee. But another part of our language, two more parts. One was the one Anthony was talking about. State statute defines when that, drug test should happen for workman's comp. Why is there an issue with just going with that if drugs or alcohol are believed to have led to the accident in the workplace, then the drug test happens?
So in
Why
one
are we
second,
just
I'll
saying
ask,
every injury? I'm confused.
in 1 second, I will ask Antonia or
Okay.
Rosemary if they want to respond to that
And-
question. But I want to go back to one thing that you said. Don't forget, in paragraph 3, we do state, which is part of our policy, board employees who self-report substance abuse problems prior to any incident requiring the employee's drug testing will be afforded employee assistance with the district employee assistance program. So we do continue to support that if they come to seek help, but not after something happens where the testing is required by.
And the final thing is, we were trying to seek an avenue to be able to grieve a reasonable suspicion test. And, and understanding that we were not trying to restrict the test at all. We were trying to create an avenue where, BPS can do its due diligence when it needs a drug test an employee, but we wanted the ability to grieve that reasonable suspicion. Is there a reason why we can't agree on that?
Because if the reasonable suspicion comes back positive or something wrong with the reasonable suspicion, you can grieve the consequence of the situation.
So wouldn't it be easier though for all parties involved to grieve it when we first notice the issue and not wait for a termination that goes all the way to the board?
I can't answer that question about ease of process.
I'm just very lost on the only way we can grieve it is after we terminate. Throughout the whole process, it's like BPS doesn't want any checks and balances just after we decide to terminate. And I didn't know if Antonia or somebody else you mentioned might want to talk about, the discrepancy between the state statute about drug testing and the BPS policy.
I don't know that there's a state statute. I'd have to have you rephrase your question
No,
again because
I think we've talked about the state statute for like 4 sessions in a row now. We've mentioned it. I believe if you could scroll up, it was in the language that you crossed out. That basically it talks about, drug testing for the workplace and workman's comp.
Yes, can you scroll up, Dr. Green? I need to look at something too.
Because it was on. I think it's right there. It was evidence. Well, I don't know.
So
our policy, reasonable suspicion drug testing should not be required except upon the recommendation of a supervisor who is at least.
No, Dr. Green, I understand that. We were
okay. No, I'm just saying that we do that. We have a reasonable suspicion guideline that we are required to follow.
Can I interrupt for a second? So I do think that matches up with state statute. However, what we're arguing is if it's not in the contract, you guys can shift and change without our input. And this is a mandatory subject of bargaining. So that's the concern. If we're following state statute and, because I'm looking at the reasonable suspicion as it's written here, and I believe I'm looking at reasonable suspicion as it is in the drug-free workplace technical guide. I don't know if this is the most updated one because I know you changed it recently, and matches up.
If you're online, it's the most recent.
No,
one.
it's not. I'm not online.
Oh.
Matches up, but what we're saying is the board can change this at any time, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to get trying to have a commitment that the reason you drug test are for these things specifically. Can you scroll up some more so I can just?
Yeah. Can I show you our form? May I show you our form?
Yeah.
Am I still sharing?
Yes. Still looking at them.
This is our form that has to be observed by two or more, well, by two supervisors, level higher than the person that's being observed. So for example, an assistant principal, a principal, a manager if we're at one of our sites. There have been times when a administrator has had to be called from a second school because there aren't two supervisors at one school at one time. So
yes, and I get this, and this is good, but then we're concerned about the workplace accident. We're concerned about, let's think, right? The teacher that was bitten by a student. Do they have any of these physical signs or symptoms? Absolutely not.
But there's
are
a
they gonna
difference
be-
between reasonable suspicion and why we take someone for a reasonable suspicion and a workplace accident that could
but-
possibly lead to workers' comp. That's where I was asking if Antonia and or Rosemary wanted to make a comment about either of those.
Dr. Green, I would just like to correct one thing real quick. According to state statute, there's actually not a difference between reasonable suspicion and the workplace injury. It's covered under reasonable suspicion in the state statute. It's covered under reasonable suspicion and all the workman comps documents that we found after doing the investigation. So I just want to be clear that that's what state statute covers.
State statute does cover that, but we also qualify for a discount through the state of Florida. And that is why we have 4 requirements to drug test, with one of them being a post-accident drug screen. Not only that, if somebody is found to have drugs in their system at the time that they were injured, we can deny that workers' compensation claim based on that information. That is a workers' compensation law.
Rosemary, are you able to list the 4 things that you drug test for that insurance reduction? Because we found it and there wasn't actually a post-accident screening. It was a return to work screening.
It does fall under reasonable suspicion, and I believe it says post-accident after that, which we are allowed to do as an employer.
Dr. Green, I think this is part of the issue. Like, we've asked for these forms, and the forms I found, instead of us arguing against different forms, actually doesn't call for post-accident screening. It falls under reasonable suspicion, which is what we've been trying to say lines up with state statute.
Well, you you have our response, so you can, it's in your court.
All right. That was the last item.
Yes, so I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Well, does anybody on my team have any questions about any of the proposals? All right. Hearing none, I am going to share my screen. Hey, Dr. Green, are you looking at my screen?
I am, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so the first item I'm responding back to is the Ese documentation requirements. And we are understanding some of the concern with this, and we're trying to at least meet you halfway to compromise, to ensure everybody has what they need in order to stay protected. But the first thing I wanted to highlight, or I did literally highlight, and I wanted to highlight, is our current language. And I think somehow that got lost in all the discussion. It says teachers are expected to show necessary documentation for students with IEPs, 504 plans, ESOL requirements, and other accommodations. So our teachers are already expected to do this. So as far as a log or some other format, that's not necessary, because them tracking it however they see fit, whatever works for them, is already required. Now, if a teacher is not doing that, then that's when an administrator should, go to the IPIS and, include that in an evaluation. But it already says that teachers are expected to do this. The only thing it doesn't do is mandate a format. So I just wanted to highlight that.
So are you saying by that we can define, meaning Brevard Public Schools can define necessary?
Well, it sounds like you already do. I mean, that's already there.
Where?
It's in the language. It says necessary documentation. So if you say to me, if you're my principal and you say, hey, I have so-and-so student, this student is supposed to have extended time for their test. Please show me that you've provided extended time for this student. I should be able to either show you a grade book, focus, a log, the actual hard copy of this exam with minutes written on there and maybe signature or initials next to that. I should be able to show you that. But what we're saying is it's just too darn confusing to start mandating how it should be done. And we're very wary of burdening our already overburdened teachers. So we want to just stick with the current language there, which basically says, yeah, you have students that you're providing services for, you have students that you're providing accommodations for, you have to document, but how you do so is up to you as the professional. So that's what we'd like to stick with that. The other part, it just gets into the weeds too much too, is what we found as we try to modify. However, I am willing to meet you on some of the other pieces of this, where it's 20 teachers coming to an IEP and 504 meetings, provided that they were notified of a meeting in a timely manner. We just pushed that to 72 hours notice rather than 24, because we know the situation. We all know the situation we're in, where you might get a planning a week at this point because of the coverage issue. So, we need to give people a little more heads up, but we are willing to meet you there. And we are willing to meet you on this situation involving attorneys or advocates or litigation. And that even might be, some teachers might see that as a tough pill to swallow, but as their representative, I know if there's an IEP issue, the district will provide representation to them in most cases. So I just want to make sure that you guys have what you need to provide that representation in those kind of situations, which are perhaps working their way towards litigation. So I'm willing to meet you there on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. That was my last one. I got to scroll up. Okay, we are going to reject this about having to choose the arbitration 15 days in advance. First of all, this is a situation that's few and far between. It maybe comes up a couple times, few times a year, so it's not a huge deal. There's some discrepancies in the legal language. I know I discussed with my attorneys their interpretation of this. I know you discussed with your attorneys their interpretation of this, and they don't agree on the interpretation. So it's our preference just to leave it as it is, and there are other factors in play here that if you are recommended for termination, you by contract have the right to, plead your case to the superintendent within X amount of days. I think it's 5 days. But then the superintendent mulls it over and gives a response. But sometimes, that's not happening much before the 15 days. So we don't want any of this action to really come before the board action, which is the termination or decision to not terminate. We believe that the board action is when the discipline really begins. So we are going to reject that. And as, like I said, as this is a rare situation, I hope we could move beyond that at this point. All right. And then I did bring this one back. You mentioned that you're waiting to see what I did with it. I'm asking once again that members of the bargaining unit who are responsible for maintaining CTE lab equipment, such as an automotive lab, shall receive an additional 8-hour planning day once per year. The district will provide a substitute for their additional planning. I want to remind you that the difference between these folks and our gen ed teachers, or whatever you want to call them, core teachers, these folks, they do write lesson plans, they do assessments, but they also have lab equipment to maintain. Many of them have internship programs that they're working with as well. So we would like to see them at least one time a year have a little coverage so they can take care of some of these additional duties, such as calibrating technical equipment and equipment that is involved in safety. Okay, that was it with those three. So at this time, do you want to caucus and come back?
Yes, let's leave and 20 minutes we'll shoot for and let each other know if we're ready.
Okay, so about 4 o'clock.
Sure.
Okay.
So we're going to leave my team. I sent caucus invites out